mantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitrai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sword Canto 1, Chapter 8, Text 10, Prayers by Queen Kunti. And I think today we're on text number 8. Text number 8. Yeah. Yeah, we're each to give on 7. Yeah, 8. Yeah. Kantum Kritam Atir Brahman Dvarakam Ratam Astitaha Upalebhe Vidhavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam Gantam Kritamatir Brahman Dvarakam Ratam Astitaha Upalebhe Vidhavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam Gantam Kritamatir Brahman Dvarakam Ratam Asita Upalebe Vidhavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam Gantum Kritamatir Brahman Dvarakam Ratamastita Upalebe Vidhavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam Gantum Kritamatir Brahman Dvarakam Ratam Astitaha Upalebe Vidhavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam. Anybody on Zoom like to chant?
What verse is it, please?
Text number 8.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes. Gantum Kritamate Brahman
Gantum. Oh, sorry, I forgot.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Dwarakamra Tamashtita Upalepi Pithavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam
Tamatir Brahman Varkan Ratam Ashtitaha Upalebe Vidavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam
Gantum Kritamatir Brahman Dwarakam Ratam Astitaha Upalebe Vidhavantim Uttaram Bhaya Vivalam.
Okay. Gantum, just desiring to start. Kritamatihi, having decided. Brahman, O Brahmana. Dwarakam, towards Dwarka. Ratam, on the chariot. Asita, seated. Upalebhe, saw Abhidhavantim, taking place here is there's a purpose in how it's all laid out. In one sense, what we've been reading so far in the first canto is somewhat of an introduction or a preamble. It's not in the sense that it's insignificant, it's totally significant. We've read such powerful chapters going right back to the beginning. So much has been described about Krishna, his situation as the personality of Godhead, the position of bhakti, what is pure devotional service, etc. And but there's a technique that is there in storytelling, which is that a person can begin the story as close to the finish as possible. You know what I mean? Like you have a story, but you start the story almost at the very end. That's where the story begins, at the very end almost. And then somehow, from that point, things kind of go back to how, how it came to be like that. And so what happened here is that the sages of Namasharanya were gathering to do this yajna for the sake of all of us in Kali Yuga, and then not being satisfied with their yajnas, they asked Sutta Goswami, who was present in the recitation of the Bhagavatam, to enlighten them with what he had heard there. They thought that perhaps that would be more beneficial than all of the yajnas that they were doing. So he begins by describing that, begins by describing that he wants to speak about the Bhagavatam. They're going to ask him to speak, and he starts talking about Vyasadeva. Of course, they ask him questions back and forth. So, Sutta Goswami, he describes the whole thing with Vyasadeva sitting there getting perplexed, and then coming to the conclusion with the help of Narada Muni, his spiritual master, that he neglected the personal pastimes of Lord Krishna in his whole compilation of Vedic literature, and therefore he should do that. And I want to get it's just significant, I find, how it's all flows. So after this conversation with Narada, after this is described by Sutta Goswami, Sonaka Rishi, on behalf of the Munis, he asks basically, what's next? Which leads up to this pastime of the son of Jonah being punished. Right. Sorry. After the sages ask Sutta Goswami what's next, they say, Sutta Goswami says, well, Vyasadeva, after compiling this great literature, and the Srimad Bhagavatam, well, he taught it to his son. He taught it to his son, Sutta Goswami, his son Sukadeva Goswami, who was already engaged in self-realization. Yeah. And so, the sages asked Sutta Goswami why he did that, because Sukadeva Goswami was already engaged in self-realization. And then he says that, well, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord, are capable of attracting even those who are self-realized, even those who are Atmaramas. They can be completely satisfied by hearing the pastimes of the Lord. And so he goes on to now set the scene for how he heard it from Sukadeva Goswami. Interesting, eh? You can see kind of like how it all flows at this point. It's not random things happening from one chapter to the next. It's very methodic. So now, after having explained some background of the Srimad Bhagavatam and to the sages, Namasaranya, and explaining, he introduced to the main, you could say, narrator of the Bhagavatam that's present, or so no, it's Pariksit is in the womb, yeah. And he's going to be the main hearer, he's going to be the catalyst of the whole Bhagavatam being spoken. And so much happening in one verse. I just find that interesting that, it's been, suddenly we've got this Brahmastra rushing at Uttara's womb. And it's just like out of nowhere, where Krishna's about to go. And that is how they would have experienced it. Uttara wasn't expecting someone to launch a Brahmastra at her. But in terms of the storyline, it's very appropriate in terms of just the story of what's happening. Now is the time when we're going to get introduced to Pariksit Maharaj, and how he will see Lord Krishna in the form of Vishnu there in the womb and being protected from the Brahmastra, and then how somehow he will remember that vision. We already discussed this in previous classes, that how Parikshit's name came to be, the witness, someone who is searching for, looking for Vishnu, because he throughout his life after coming out of the womb, he's wondering who's that personality, trying to find that same person we saw in that moment. And then the actual recitation of the discussion between Pariksit and Sukadeva Goswami can take place. So yeah, it's quite expert storytelling, we could say. The way that everything is placed and laid out perfectly, a perfect flow to how the story goes. So that's one way to appreciate this verse. And also, there is a brief purport that talks about how when the Lord protects, one that's completely dependent on him. And Prabhupada gives the example of how a father is more attentive to his son, who is exclusively dependent. And we have many examples of this. We have that example of Draupadi, who was hanging on to her sari as Dushyasana was attempting to disrobe her. And when she finally just threw up her hands in the air and let go of everything, and leaving the result to Krishna provided unlimited cloth, so she was never exposed or violated by Dushyasana. In that sense. And other examples are there too, like Ambarish Maharaj. Ambarish Maharaj was, simply engaged in a fast, and along comes Durvasa Muni, and being a demanding guest, he wanted that he and his entourage, or actually I think it was maybe just him, we don't really hear about his entourage at that time, I think. He was expecting to be received, and so he went to take his bath, and meanwhile the time came for the fast to end for Ambarish Maharaj, and he didn't want to, he was being a very cultured person, knowing it was proper for him to attend to his guest first. He didn't want to, deviate from that, so he decided, along with some consultation with his associates, that he would just take a little bit of water so he could somewhat break the fast. This long fast, it was like a year or something that he was fasting. And he then broke that fast with a little bit of water, and then Durvasa Muni became so enraged and manifested this massive demon to kill Ambarish. In one sense, it's similar to having a Brahmastra thrown at you suddenly, right? Like you're just kind of suddenly facing death. So what did always making arrangements for us to try to fulfill the desires that we long to fulfill. So he's also providing everything for everyone. Krishna has made all arrangements for everything to happen. Not even a blade of grass can move without Lord Krishna sanctioning that. And so everything is happening because of the will of the Lord. And the protection is always available. If you have a son who is exclusively dependent on the father's protection, and a son who is not exclusively dependent, but somehow neglects the father or decides to do something against the father's instructions, to keep with the analogy. It's not like the father's protection is withdrawn. It's that the son engages by his own will and experiences according to his own desire, and at any time can turn to the father for protection. So the protection is never actually withdrawn. And this is kind of the analogy that's there for the spiritual master, which we sing every morning. Samsada Nada Lira Loka Tanaya Karan Gana Gana like a big rain cloud, always pouring mercy. And sometimes that rain lands on the ocean. Sometimes that rain lands on a fertile piece of ground. And when it lands on a fertile ground, then all kinds of things can grow from there. If it lands on a rock or on the ocean, then it's not, the impact isn't evident. And so is the case with us if we're not interested in the protection of the Lord. The mercy is there, even if we're not interested in the mercy of the Guru. The mercy isn't actually ever vanquished. It's just that we may avail ourselves to it or not. For one who is exclusively dependent on Krishna, then Krishna is there, and this is not a form of favoritism. Does Krishna actually favor souls, devotees? This question comes up periodically in the Bhagavatam. Does Krishna favor the demons or the demigods? Is there some bias in the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And it's not the case. That it's simply a question of, because Krishna is a being, a supreme being who desires to reciprocate love, then that opportunity is there at any time for any spirit soul. And it just becomes quite obvious in the case of the devotees when that takes place. Sometimes there are cases where, especially in the Bhagavatam, when the devotees and the demons are side by side, it seems like Krishna is favoring the devotees because he's helping them. Like when he appears as Mohini Murti, when he's helping the demigods, achieve that pot of nectar. It seems like there's some favoritism going on there. But then there's other times when there's a contrast to that, where we see Krishna, like in the 10th canto, how he actually chastises Indra, even Brahma. Or we also see in other cantos how even those in a demonic type of situation get the mercy. We see Bali Maharaj, even though he's in the family of descendants of Asuras. We also see that great demon, what was his name, that was manifested to kill Indra. And
Vritasura.
Vitrasura. who was an outright demon, even more so than Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj, I mean, in appearance, like he was a ghastly creature who actually fought. Well, I guess Bali Maharaj also conquered the universe, but they stood in battle, and as Bali Maharaj also did with Indra. But in the case with Vichasura, it was that they were basically, Vitrasura could understand nobody could detect Vitrasura's true devotion until the last seconds, basically. Because as he fought viciously right until the end, and his death was apparent, then there was an exchange of words that happened between Indra and Vitrasura, in this moment, Indra could understand, oh, he's actually got the mercy of the Lord. He's actually a devotee. He didn't know. And because his words were so powerful. So the point is that bhakti is utterly independent. Krishna's mercy is utterly independent. It's not a form of favoritism or anything like that about who Krishna bestows it upon. It's just those who desire to within our hearts actually take shelter of the Lord. That's the only real condition where Krishna reciprocates and has that loving exchange. That was going on with Vitrasura internally all along, because we know that Vitrasura was none other than what's his name? Chitraketu, who was a great devotee. Just happened to have an inconvenient situation with Parvati and Lord Shiva that put him in that situation, but he was actually a devotee. So it's all there. Prabhupada says here, the Lord protects everyone, but one who depends completely upon him is especially looked after by the Lord. The Father is more attentive to the little son who is exclusively dependent on the Father. And it's quite, the depth of that statement is quite amazing. That Krishna's mercy is there, and the prerequisite for getting that mercy, at least in this context that we're looking at now, is dependence. That if actually one is only dependent on Krishna, it doesn't matter what one's circumstance could be it in a demigod situation, be it in a demonic situation, be it in the situation here with Uttara or Pariksit, even a helpless child in the womb. We can say here that Pariksit is, of course, Krishna knew Pariksit was there, therefore he manifested, so already it's understood that a great Vaishnava was appearing there. So we could assume that he was also, and we see throughout his life how he actually was also of this category, dependent on the Lord. And when that dependence on the Lord manifests somehow in a person's life, then everything opens up, and then that's like the substance of the Bhagavatam. Every chapter, one after the other, is just another kind of magical moment where the person's dependence on the Lord is revealed, and some great pastime is able to manifest. So that's so applicable even to the present day. We simply have to somehow become fully dependent on Krishna, and we get this mercy. We get this mercy from the Lord. So, yeah, I wanted to cover these 2 points about how it's not random that all of a sudden now there's a Brahmastra flying through the air, that there's a masterful storytelling going on right now, which began at the very beginning, with almost at the end of the story, after everything has transpired. And now, the whole Bhagavatam has already been spoken, and Sutta Goswami is going to relate it to the sages of Naimisharanya, but he himself, when he begins his storytelling, he also he also beautifully that's manifested in the Bhagavatam in different places. Those are the 2 points. So, Jagannatha, we just grab the mic. Yes, Prabhu.
Oh,
It was very nice how you took that small purport, give an overview of how the Bhagavatam is so systematic. And initially, when you were talking about that, it was like, okay, talk about Krishna, and once we talked about it, talks about Krishna, the battlefield, protecting the devotees, not Krishna and the gopis, which is a really key point, because that's, the Bhagavad Sapta professional reciters, often they just go to the 10th canto, and particularly the 29th and 32nd chapter.